Welcome to episode 3 of season 2 of Scottish Digest. In this episode, we will be speaking to Alistair from the podcast Scots Whay Hae, who will be talking to us about his favourite place and area in Scotland, which is Annan and the Solway Firth. Alistair is the host of the podcast Scots Whay Hae, which discusses modern Scottish culture, whatever and wherever that may be. And Alistair has had some fantastic guests on his podcast. Alistair and I also appeared on the BBC Scotland show The Big Scottish Book Club Crime Special episode, which you can watch on iPlayer if you're in the UK. Just before we speak to Alistair, here's a wee clip from an episode of Scots Whay Hae.
Hello everyone and welcome to another Scots Whay podcast. And today I'm joined once again by writer Denzel Myrick to talk about his new novel, Murder at Holly House. Hello, Denzel.
Hello there, Alistair. It's nice to see you again.
And nice to see you again. And this is, as we just mentioned before we start recording, this is a bit of a departure. So what can you tell listeners about Murder at Holly House?
Murder at Holly House is set in 1950s North Yorkshire, and it involves D.I. Frank Grasby, who arrives in the village of Elderby to find somebody dead down a chimney, something he wasn't expecting. And one of the lines that the young laird of the manor says on this discovery, well, Santa got it terribly wrong this year.
Hiya, Alistair. It's lovely to have you on the podcast.
Hello, Dawn. Thank you for asking me.
Oh, I wasn't going to not ask you after meeting you, like Billy Connolly-esque. So can you tell us a little bit about you and about your podcast, Scots Whay Hae?
Sure. Well, Alistair Braidwood, who runs the Scots Whay Hae website and podcast, both of which look at Scottish culture. They're a celebration of all things about Scottish culture. So it started out kind of focusing on books, but now it's music, it's theatre, it's paintings, it's opera even, covering all sorts of different things. I just recently did a podcast with a couple of choreographers who've got 2 dance shows out, or they did have last month. So it's amazing the different things that we've kind of covered. I've learned so much doing it over the years. We're coming up to our 300th podcast, so that's coming up fairly soon.
Good God, that's an achievement there.
Yeah, so it started 2011, I think was the first one. Website started in 2009, and both just been regularly doing it over the years, and it's been great. I've absolutely loved it.
Yeah. You've got an amazing, so many different guests, like you were saying. It's just so random, isn't it? Each episode is just, you never know what you're going to get. I like that.
Well, it's interesting because when I started the website, people said, concentrate on one thing, and that's the best advice. And I thought, I don't want to do that because I'm interested in loads of things. Right. Yes, I was doing a degree in literature at Glasgow Uni at the time, which is one of the reasons I started it. But I also love my music and I love going to theatre and all sorts of things. So I kind of ignored that advice, and maybe that was the right thing to do, but it does mean that you get a real mix of people coming on. We did one with Nancy from CrimeCon, for instance. I never thought I would, and introduced her through yourself. And of course, we've had the podcast sharing collaboration that you sorted out last year, which had all different people from different areas. So yeah, it's a great way of meeting and talking to new people. I think that's the main thing. And if you're interested in people, there's nothing better.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And that's where we met Nancy as well, didn't it? At the BBC Scotland's The Big Scottish Book Club. That was where I first met you as well,
yeah.
In person. It was lovely doing that with you, but that wasn't your type of book, though, was it? It was Truman Capote in Cold Blood.
Well, in a way, it was my type of book I would have read before I started Scots Whay Hae. I'd read it years and years and years ago, when I used to read a lot of American writers and things like that. I was really glad you asked me, because it was something different for me, because now I mostly review fiction. That's not true. I review a lot of non-fiction as well. But in terms of crime, it's mostly crime fiction instead of true crime. So it was interesting to go back to a book which I kind of still thought of as a novel, because it's a kind of novelization, a dramatization of a true crime, which is what we ended up talking about a lot on the day. So, but actually you asking me to do that, I think that's a great example of the kind of connections that you make through doing podcasts and meeting new people. And then someone will say, oh, do you know who might do that? Don might do that. That's the way that these, and that's probably why you've asked me on today, because, these connections are made.
Oh, sure. Yeah, always. I love making connections and just sharing. Like you say, it's interesting meeting new people and different walks of life. So, yeah, definitely. I'm glad we met.
Yes, absolutely.
So, anyway, we're here today to talk about one of your favourite places in Scotland. Do you want to tell us where it is?
I was so excited when you said this, because the place is Annan in Dumfriesshire, in the Borders. And not a lot of people still know where it is. It's become a little bit more famous recently because Ashley Jensen, the new lead on Shetland, that's where she's from.
Never,
and I'm
is
kind of
she?
surprised. Yeah, she's from Annan, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I'm kind of surprised we never bumped into each other as kids, because she's a year older than me. She, I think, was born in 69 and I was born in 70. But we didn't. However, we used to go. The reason I picked Annan is because when we were kids, from a young age to teenage years, that's where we would go on our holidays. So whether it was Easter, whether it was school holidays, whether it was summer holidays, that's where we would go, because that's where my mum's from. So her mum and dad, but although my granddad passed away when I was only 3, we used to go down there for our holidays. And it was, in hindsight, it was a good thing, because I was from Cambuslang in Glasgow, a very different place, I think, to be playing on the streets than Annan, which is very much, it was a kind of, almost like a Famous Five time. We were young, there was lots of fields, you had the Solway not that far, you would go fishing for tadpoles. It sounds like from something from the 1950s, but all sorts of things like that. There was a pipeline that used to go down to the Solway, which we would walk down. Don't think we were supposed to, but we did. And we would climb trees and build tree houses, and we would play putting, and it was just a lovely childhood. I'd go cycling. I don't think we would have been allowed to cycle around Cambuslang all day, but in Annan, there was hardly any cars really on the street back then in the 70s and 80s. And we would just went everywhere on bikes. It was a great time.
Mm-hmm. It sounds amazing. And you went there, you've got a brother as well. That's who you went there with, wasn't it?
Yes, me and my brother's 3 years younger than me, and we would go down. You asked for a picture, and I sent you a picture of me and Andy. Now, Andy would have been really young there, looking at that picture. But, there was a little play park where we would go, and as he reminded me, back then play parks were all covered in concrete. They were death traps, they were really. And we're swinging up as high as we could, and it was beside Annan High School, which was the local high school. So we soon made friends with local kids, Peter and Helen Gilmore, if they ever hear this, hello, who lived in the same crescent as my granny did, and other folk like Pete Jackson, and then later on other kids. And so they were almost like your holiday friends, if you know. Mm-hmm. You had your school friends, Cambuslang friends, school friends here, and then you had your holiday pals when you went down there. Mm-hmm. And so it was like another life, slightly from the rest of the year.
So have you been more recently? I mean, have you ever been back again? When was the last time you were there?
Funnily enough, I went last year because my mum and I were going down for a wee break down south. And she's still got friends there that she went to school with and keeps in touch with them. So she was going to meet 2 of them for a lunch. So I was driving. So I said, I'll drop you off. You go and have your lunch, and then I'll have a wander about and, old memories. And it was great. It was really lovely to do. It's not a big place, Annan. You can walk around it quite easily. And it was great to see some of the old places that I remembered were there. Of course, a lot of them weren't. but the basic structure of the town and the high street and everything was still there. And some of the old buildings, and Lady Street Cinema, which was the cinema we used to go to as kids, you know, the kind of morning shows of various things. It was great to go back and have lots of memories. But I do often, if I'm going down south or I'm passing nearby, I'll pop in because my granny and granddad are both buried there. So I'll go and, you know, give the stone a clean and put some flowers on and that kind of thing. So that's kind of the only time that I'm down. But it was nice to go back last year and really explore again.
And they've got some beautiful beaches there as well, haven't they? Did you ever?
Well, absolutely. The one we used to go to was Powfoot, which was, I mean, I could cycle to it, you know, it was quite a lengthy cycle, but so that's not too far from Annan at all by car. And it's got some great beaches and they had jellyfish on the beaches, you know, just lots of, there was a, I think they were called the Notmans. And I don't know how legal this was or even anything, but they used to sell ice cream out of their kind of back kitchen. Like proper ice creams that they'd got in their freezer. So jellyfish and ice cream, that's what I remember a lot about Powfoot. But there's a nice hotel there and the hotel's still there and there's a golf course and it is quite a kind of destination. But for us, it was like jumping in the car, going and playing in the rock pools and then maybe braving a swim.
Sounds good. And it mentioned, it was maybe before your time, but it mentioned that there used to be a mile over the viaduct. There used to be a railway over the viaduct. Did you know anything about that? It was quite interesting.
In Annan, no.
It used to, over the Solway. It used to be from England to Scotland.
Oh, right. Sorry, I was thinking more just about Annan, but there was a bridge that went over because the railway line still has to go over the Solway. I think it's a while since I passed. But my memory here is if you're driving south from Annan towards Gretna and then Carlisle, particularly near Gretna, you can look out your right and you can see a bridge with the railway goes on it going down south. So that's probably true. Yeah,
I read that it was the Scottish used to go over use the bridge to go over to England because they could drink there 7 days a week and you couldn't. I like that. That's
probably true. I have to say, there is a great history of the borders. I read a book last year and its name escapes me. But it was all about the history of the borders. It was the writer had walked from one side in the east all the way along, jumping between the two sides, going from Scotland to England and back to the Solway. And it's a fascinating history. I didn't know a lot about it, but it really is.
I haven't ever been to Annan, but I read somewhere that a lot of the buildings were made of sort of dark red.
Yeah, that's right.
Is that right? And
a lot of the municipal buildings, which are still standing, a lot of them unfortunately look pretty empty from when I went round recently. And a lot of they've got that real kind of red sandstone. I don't know the history behind where that might come from, but that's true. It's a really interesting. There's a lot of history there as well. Thomas Carlyle is linked. In a moment, I'll talk about a cracking fish and chip shop, which is there. But the tale is that on that space, Robert Burns wrote The Deal's a War with the Excisemen because he worked down in Dumfries. He was an exciseman down in Dumfriesshire.
And isn't there a cairn on the jetty that commemorates him as well, I think?
Yeah, there will be. Yeah.
No, I like that. Aye, Robert Burns, eh?
Yeah, gets everywhere. Robert Burns gets everywhere.
Tell us about the fish and chip shop.
Well, I was thinking about, because you'd said, where did you go to eat? And we didn't go out a lot. It was usually kind of, even back then, it was kind of takeaway. I will say when we were really young kids, there was a corner shop which we could walk down to that used to sell like 5p mixtures and, real like fruit salads and blackjacks and all those kind of things. And I mean, no wonder my teeth are so bad. That's what we were kind of raised on. If my granny would give us a 5p, we were straight down there for something very sugary and sticky. So that was probably the first place I thought of. And then there was the Solway Cafe, which when we were young, when I was kind of 12, 13, about to become a teenager, I don't think my folks were that happy about me going there. It was almost like the coffee shops of the 50s, you know. It was like, oh, I think that's where the bad kids hang about, all that kind of stuff. It's absolutely fine, and I never saw any bother. And coming from Cambuslang, it was unlike, you know, it was a different thing there. But
you would be the bother, are you not? Bringing the bother there.
I was a very good child, I have to say. But then there was, now, I remember this as Pagani's fish and chip shop. And I looked it up and it said the Cafe Royal, and I think that's its real name, is the Cafe Royal, but the family who ran it were the Paganis, and that's what everyone knew it as Pagani's Fish and Chips. And it's a cracking, it was a really good, people travelled from miles around. In fact, I was looking at their TripAdvisor, and people still travel from Carlisle to get some fish and chips.
Really?
Which must be freezing by the time they get home. I think you can sit in, I'm pretty sure you can. But yeah, that's a really good fish and chip shop. Worth visiting. If you're in Annan, that's definitely the place I would say to visit.
And what about staying when you went? Did you ever stay? So did you stay with family, or did you just
stayed at my gran? So my gran lived on Solway Crescent. Now, it's living on a crescent's great because there's hardly any cars again going round. So you've got this grass mound in the middle, and we could just cycle round it and round it and round it. And so that's where we would stay at my granny's every time. Yeah, she passed away in 2011. So since then, that's why we don't visit like we once did. But right up to the end, you know, I would still go to visit her back then. Yeah.
How long does it take to travel from where you are now? Is it not too
from Glasgow down? I would say if you really put your foot down, you could probably do it in an hour. But probably about an hour and a half, I would say. And there's some lovely ways to get there. You know, you could just beast it down the M74 and do that. But the old road, I'm going to say 7078, but I might have got that wrong. But the old B road's still open, which is a really lovely road. And once you get down to kind of Viaduct, you can take the back roads and go through things like Lockerbie and Ecclefechan and all these wonderful names.
Love that name. Always loved that, Ecclefechan.
Yeah. And Lochmaben and all these places. And these were the places we used to cycle to because those roads were quiet. So you would get on your bike on a summer's day and go out to Hoddam Castle or go down the coast and go down to the Solway. And we used to play in the fishing nets, which now seems like a strange and probably quite a dangerous thing to do. But they were all kind of like walls, and you would kind of like little mazes and yeah. Mm-hmm. I now know that the tide is actually quite dangerous in there, but as kids, danger wasn't really a thing. You kind of just went and did it. That was the kind of famous five side of things. You would just go and you know, luckily you were safe.
I love that famous five reference. I can picture it in my head because I was a fan as well.
Yeah, it was funny. And my friends actually had a dog, so we had our own Timmy the dog as well to kind of go around. But as I said, it was just such it sounds, I don't know if I'm viewing it now through real rose-tinted specs, but it was a really idyllic place to kind of run about in summer and, you know, and just enjoy it. Plus, it was also, you know, half an hour drive to Dumfries or Carlisle. So if you wanted to go into the big town, if you like, you could still go and do that.
As kids, though, I think I preferred the country as well. I wasn't bothered about the towns or shopping and all that. It was like you, it was sprachling over things and splashing about. That was, happy times. Don't get that anymore, do you?
It really was.
You just jumping in puddles with your welly boots was just a great time.
Yeah, and you know, going back to the old swing parks and everything, they were absolutely brutal. But you didn't think that you might come off and split. I think I did once come off and split my head, but you know, you did. You know, you just got back on and went and did it again.
Oh, that's just what you're used to, isn't it? It's normal. And are you into walking, Alistair? Because there's a big walk, isn't there? Now,
I am into walking, but I wasn't really at that time. So I would go walks, and some of the ones I would go would be down to the Solway and along the coast and back up. I was a runner when I was younger. I used to run a lot, so I would, you know, go running to Powfoot and even further. My my uncle and his wife, great uncle, I should say, he was an ex-gamekeeper, so he lived in this wee place called Green Hill with really low roofs, and there was a couple of ferrets running about the house and stuff like that, real old school, but sometimes you would run out as far as there to go visit. And but there's a lovely walk that goes down the river, and the River Annan's a hugely important part of it. Fishing was a big part of the kind of economy there, although my mum's dad actually worked in Cochrane's Boilermakers, which was down in Newby. They're actually from a little village called Newby, which is just down the river. And Cochrane's was a big employer in the area and did boilers for boats and trains and all sorts of things. But yeah, the River Annan's a big thing. And you can still do a great walk, which is all pathed now. You don't have to fight through bramble bushes to get there. And that's a really beautiful walk, actually, to go out that way.
And there's a route called, is it the Annandale Way as well? Is that the one you're talking about?
I'm not sure if that's the name of it. I wouldn't know the name of it, but it could be. But there'll be walks up hills, and I'm trying to remember the names of them now.
There's a Moffat Hills. The one starts at Moffat.
The Moffat Hills. That's quite a distance away, though.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is it? What is it? A 53-mile walking route? If you're really keen.
Well, you'd have to be really keen.
It
must be about that. It must be about that. But you could probably, a bit like the West Highland Way, you could walk and do it. And also, as I was saying earlier, you can walk the border line. You might have to, sometimes move from one side to the next to make it along, but you can do it. It can be done.
And you mentioned, is there a stone bridge there as well? It's quite designed by Robert Stevenson. I love old things. I love these kind of old designy things.
There's a beautiful bridge when you arrive in Annan. That goes over a stone bridge. Now, I don't know. Again, I don't know my research. We just to arrive and that was it. And we'd be cheering when we arrived and we'd pass the sign that said Annan. We thought, whoa, we're in Annan. But it's a beautiful old bridge. And yeah, that's very much, there's lots of these kind of striking features in the place. If you like your old buildings and you like a bit of local history, it's worth checking out. In fact, have you seen the television programme where the presenter goes from town to town? I think it's called In My Town, something like that. He's a visually impaired presenter and he goes with his guide dog. I think they're all on BBC iPlayer, and he did one in Annan. And that's, if you're interested in what I'm talking about, he'll give you real dates and times and people and places on that.
Oh, that'll be interesting. I'll have a look at that. The Solway, is that of Scandinavian origin? Do you know about that?
The name of it?
Aye.
It could be. There's lots of Kirk named places in the area, which is Scandinavian for church. And so I don't know if it is or not, but it was a place where I think a kind of border raids happened, the fights for the rights of the lands on the Solway and fishing rights and all sorts of things. I think the Vikings would have been in and around that area at some point, considering how far down the coast they went and then over to Ireland as well. Yes.
The Wicker Man was filmed round and about down that area, wasn't it? Were you about for that?
A little bit before my time, I'm pleased to say. But actually, Dawn, it's one of my favourite films. I love The Wicker Man in a big, big way.
I didn't know. I always thought it was up north, further north. It was filmed.
Supposed to be, but I think it was filmed nearer kind of Castle Douglas way, so slightly more into Galloway. I think that's right. I'm not entirely sure. I should know because I've read books about the making of the Wicker Man. I think that's right. And where they got that lovely sunset, and I think that's all filmed on the mainland. And I should know where the house is that the Lord Summerisle stays as well. I can't remember, but yeah, you're right. It's in that Dumfries and Galloway area. And what I would say is a lot of people overlook not just Annan, but Dumfries and Galloway in general. I think that's partly because they built the M74 right, beside it. So if you were travelling from Glasgow to Carlisle, for instance, you would go through Annan. That was one of the main roads. So it was really busy thoroughfare. And then, of course, that changed. And a lot of these places are forgotten for that reason. I've spoken to a lot of people who live in Galloway and love it, and it's a beautiful part of the world, as is Dumfries. But a lot of people forget about it on their way up to the Central Belt, or even on their way up to the Highlands.
I do the same. I come from the northeast and I get over to Carlisle straight up in the motorway. And it's such a boring. I am used to driving in the Highlands and I love, actually doing something with your brain and actually driving a car around corners. That's what straight line is boring. So I don't know why, but it's quicker, I think, isn't it?
It is, and it's a good bit quicker, which is why
It is.
they did it. What I would say is, if you're ever visiting Annan, instead of just jumping back onto the motorway, head out towards Lochmaben and Viaduct and those wee back roads, because they're beautiful roads to drive and they're quiet these days, unless you get stuck behind a tractor, which can happen.
That's the thing, isn't it? These
and then
roads.
you'll come out kind of near Moffat. So it's quite a nice drive, and it doesn't take that much longer than it would on the motorway. But if you want to go, say you were going up to Ayrshire, that drive, Dumfries, Galloway, Castle Douglas, and then up the corner, up past Culzean Castle and into Ayr. That's a beautiful drive.
I've never done that. I've actually looked at properties in over in Annan and over that way, because it is. I think I saw it one time on Escape to the Country, and I was like, oh, I'd love to be over there, but I've never made it. Do you think, is that somewhere you would ever, you think, maybe have a wee retirement too, or is it not for you?
Now, it's interesting you talk about Escape to the Country, because it's a programme I used to work in television. Well, I used to subtitle television. I didn't work in television. I subtitled the telly for a few years. And I remember doing an Escape to the Country kind of in Perthshire, and I thought, oh, that would be quite nice. And my brother's up in Braemar, so it's not that far. So I think I might think of going further north than there. But my brother saw a property program, and he must have read it online or something. And there was a beautiful old house which overlooked the river, and it was quite inexpensive in terms of how much. And he kind of went, oh, that would be good to maybe buy as a holiday home or something. But then sense kicked in, and I went, no, I don't think that's right. And I kind of wonder if you're to go back there, if that would spoil the memories that we have of it when we were kids, because it'd be such a different thing. I don't know, but it was nice to go back and visit, and I think it made me feel I should visit more often. But my mum's got connections still there. I don't really have connections there anymore. Although I've still got family on my mum's side who are farmers. They've been farming in the area, and some of them are still down in that area and teaching and doing all sorts of things. But I don't know is the answer. There's some lovely spots. There is some absolutely gorgeous spots.
Yeah, but like you said, it spoil it. It's nice.
Yeah, it's something to consider, I think, definitely. Something I'd like to mention, if it's okay. One of the things they do every summer now, border towns have their ridings of the marches. They have their kind of celebrations every summer. And Annan had the riding of the marches every year, and like people would, because it's a country area. There's lots of horses and that kind of thing, and people would get dressed up in the hunting. I don't know if they actually hunted. That's suddenly crossed my mind if there was actually hunts going on, but they were dressed up in that way, and they were blowing horns, and they were on horseback, and everyone went down and cheered and all that kind of stuff. And I have to mention this, or my mum would kill me. There's always a Queen of the Border each year, and my mum was once Queen of the Border.
Oh, she?
With the crown and the staff and all that. Yeah, I think she'd only be about 15 or 16 maybe. But
is that like a gala or something? Is that what is it?
It's a gala. It's a kind of gala. Yeah.
I've never heard
them all over the borders, but the Annan one's called the Riding of the Marches, and that's because it's nearly all done on horseback.
It's an amazing thing to watch. I mean, obviously, I don't agree with the hunting side of it, but it is.
I don't know if they did. I don't know. They weren't dressed in red things, and it seemed more ceremonial. But I could be wrong about that. That could be me being naive kid. You
don't think about that.
No,
it's just been part of that. I on my other podcast, I hadn't ever heard of this gala. When there's the queens and such like, and I did an episode that talked about Lockerbie, something that happened in Lockerbie, and that was the first time I heard about it, and it sounded amazing. And my sister and I were saying, why did we never have anything like that? That would have been so cool.
So interesting. It seems to be a real border town thing, because they have it in Jedburgh and Galashiels and all of these places. And the more I'm thinking, I think it was more about you talked about the Wicker Man earlier. There was more about kind of celebrating the summer and the almost like a kind of harvest festival aspect to it, but on horseback, if that makes sense. And they used to have fancy dress competitions. You would get dressed up and go in, and one year, this ages me. It was the year after Scotland got put out the World Cup in 1978, or it was maybe that summer. And Ali's Tartan Army, Ali MacLeod's Tartan Army, came back with her tail between her legs and everything. And we got dressed up as Ali's Battered Army, and we were like in football strips with bandages and all that around us, and took part in this parade. We were on my Uncle Alec's van, and I was talking to my mum before we started talking. I said, "How did we get Alec's van? Why would you let us have this van?" But it was again that idea of kind of, you wouldn't get that in Glasgow, or at least not that way. So it was a really interesting, kind of very different experience.
Aye, I like that. It's like, communities coming together. You can do that in the weird places, can't you?
Yeah, it was stuff like that, because like the leader of the march might be the local hairdresser, and then there would be the farmers, and then there would be the schools would take part, and it really did bring the community together, no doubt about it.
I'm talking about events that take place. Have you ever been to the Annan Harbour Festival? Have you ever been down one? No. It's on every year. I think it's on towards the end of the year, September time, and it doesn't sound as good as the riding thing you're talking about, but it's just cooking demonstrations, food and drink and crafts and arts and live music.
That sounds like that's much more recent than I would have been down there, but it sounds like a good thing to visit. And I think from what I could tell last time, Annan's really trying hard to have a bit of a regeneration in terms of trying to make it more of a destination for tourism. They've got Annan Distillery. That's where my mum went for lunch that day. They've got their own distillery down there. That's new. They've got a lot more kind of brown sign spaces, historical. They didn't really play on their history back then. I talked about fishing industry, but the other big industry in the 70s and 80s and into the 90s was the Chapel Cross power station down there, which was a huge power station, and a lot of people worked there. And then that closed, as you can imagine, and has been flattened. When we used to go down to Annan in the car, a game that we always played was the first person to see Chapel Cross from the motorway. and you can still see the kind of where it was, but they've not got these big cooling towers that they had previously. But I think it was really struggling in the 80s and 90s for that reason. Apologies if that's not correct, but that was the feeling I got when a big industry kind of left, as it did in so many places. I get the feeling it's really trying to kind of reclaim its own identity with lots of different things going on. So that Harbour Festival sounds, perfect for that, and something I might check out at some point.
And do you think it can do that then? Has it got the structure about it that it can actually make it a little tourist spot, a destination?
So it's close to lots of lovely countryside. It's close. It's got a lot of its own identity historically. Lots of old buildings, statues, that kind of thing. Lovely. It's got the river with everything that goes on down there. Annan Athletic Football are doing better than they used to when I was a kid. Ooh. They're now doing all right. So yeah, I think it could do that. I think it probably is doing that. And what I was really impressed the last time I was there was how busy it was. It really was busy. And it looked to me like a lot of them would be tourists. So I think, yes, I think it can, and I think it is doing that, to be honest.
Good.
But that's taken from like a couple of experiences recently. As I say, I kind of haven't been for a long time.
Yeah. So have you got any plans to go again soon, or?
Well, Andy, my brother, and I often talk about the two of us going and just walking the streets that we used to go. And I think we will do that, no doubt about it. Go up and walk round the Crescent, go up Hecklegirth, which is the name of the street, another great name, Hecklegirth. And maybe even walk down the Pipeline, if we can still do that. And look at the fields where we used to make the tree houses and carve our names, and the railway bridge where we used to wave at the drivers, you know, that kind of stuff that you did. And walk down to the Solway and probably go to Powfoot. And do all the things that we used to do and just kind of refresh our memories for all those things. I don't know if the tennis courts and the putting are still open. That used to be a regular thing. But we'd do that. And a wee fish tea in Pagani's would just kind of round the whole thing off.
God, you know, I've not heard of fish teas for a wee while. Fish teas, yeah. Can't beat a cup of tea in a fish shop.
Exactly.
That sounds like a lot. I think that's a nice idea. Will you video it though, so you've got it?
We'll certainly be taking lots of pictures and selfies with it when we do, if we do. I'm sure we will, actually. And I'm sure Andy would love to take his son down and show him, you know, where we kind of went and played as well. I think the swing parks will be more child-friendly than they were in our day. But it was just like, you know, picking a football till it was past dark and you couldn't see it anymore. And I think it was because my mum grew up there and she felt safe. So she felt safe us just, you know, getting up in the morning and she wouldn't see us for the rest of the day. And it was fine. And she never worried, you know, at all.
Mm-hmm. These are the days, eh? I remember these days as well. I'm showing my age as well. When you said the football, when you said about the football and how Ali, I thought you were going to talk about Ali McCoy. So that's my era.
Right,
I didn't know that. I thought, I don't know him.
No. That's I watched him play a game of handball, Ali McCoy's back in the day, East Kilbride boy.
Right.
I was Cambuslang, so I used to go up to East Kilbride quite a bit. But no, Ali McLeod would have been before your time. He was the manager in '78, and I was only 8 years old. I was only a kid myself. But it kind of traumatized the nation when we went to Argentina thinking we were going to win the World Cup, and then we're just battered.
It's got a wee bit better though. I remember it always used to be getting battered.
Yeah. No, recently it certainly has.
Mm-hmm. Alistair, it's been really, really good listening to you talking about your childhood memories. I've loved it. Really, thank you. It's
been lovely to do it. It's been lovely to think about those days and kind of think about time spent in Annan, where it really was an escape for us all. You know, that's how it felt anyway. A real escape to the country. For all of us.
You had to get that in, didn't you? Can you tell everybody where they can find Scots Whay Hae?
Well, yes, absolutely. Scotswayhae.com is where the website is. And on there, you'll find all the podcasts. And also, I should say, I do a radio show on Camglen Radio every Sunday night between 7 and 9. You can find the links there to that show too. But there's lots of reviews and the podcast interviews and a whole lot more on the website. You'll find the Scots Whay Hae podcast if you just put in Scots Whay Hae, that's SCOTSWHAYHAE, wherever you get your podcast from. I know we all say that these days, but it is true. It's on everything. And then we've got on social media as well. Same spelling as Scots Whay Hae on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, or X as it is now known. But so that's where you can find everything Scots Whay Hae-ish.
So, Annan, according to Undiscovered Scotland, is probably derived from the Gaelic goddess of prosperity, Anu. And, according to Visit Scotland, Annan is a town on the north shore of the Solway Firth, lying on the east side of the River Annan and being about 8 miles or 13 kilometres from the English border. The Solway Firth estuary, which forms part of the border between England and Scotland, between Cumbria and Dumfries and Galloway, and is the third largest estuary in the UK, being a special area of conservation, comprises coastal dunes, salt marshes, raised mires, and agricultural land. If you're a bird lover, there are also 2 nature reserves along the coastline, where, according to Visit Scotland, you can see thousands of barnacle and pink-footed geese from autumn until spring. And a did you know is that the American heavy metal band Slipknot released a song called Solway Firth in July 2019, which was named after the Firth. I also mentioned the Annan Harbour Festival, which takes place in September each year and is a fun and free family event with a range of activities including cooking demonstrations, food and drink, crafts, children's entertainment, live music, and boats, fishing and heritage displays. You can visit annanharbour.org.uk for more information. And that's almost the end of the episode. If you have enjoyed this episode and would like to hear more Alistair's Billy Connolly-esque voice, then, like Alistair said, you can find Scots Whay Hae podcast wherever you get your podcasts. A link to this, as well as to everything mentioned in this episode, will be in the show notes, as well as on our website, cluranton.com/Scottish Digest. That's clurantonn.com/Scottish Digest. We hope you join us next time for another wee slice of bonnie Scotland.